people in charge in a free country won't try to legislate something that will constrict people's freedoms in the face of that information. I think that's the fear. There are some topics that should not be studied scientifically.
Right.
Yeah, it means it's not a free society. It's not a society of free inquiry, which I think you need ultimately. But let me not say even as a scientist, I just simply care what is objectively true.
Neil deGrasse Tyson detonated a string of truth bombs that left the MAGA Pundit scrambling for cover. In one brutal exchange, Tyson ripped the conversation out of Shapiro's comfort zone and planted it firmly in the territory of constitutional freedoms and intellectual honesty. This was a masterclass in dismantling culture war posturing with cold, hard logic.
If you study some topic that's a hot button topic and you bring scientific methods and tools to it, we don't trust, I'm interpreting here.
That's Neil deGrasse Tyson's starting shot, calm, precise, and already cutting right to the heart of the problem. It's not a rant.
The question is, what is the relationship of that to biology? Meaning that the argument is made that trans women are women, for example. And what that seems to mean is that trans women are identical to women. Now, if people want to say trans women are not biological women, obviously that is the case. But people don't seem to want to say that, although that is obviously scientifically true. Trans women are not biological women. Biological women are biological women.
Ben Shapiro had just set the stage with his own opener, accusing the left of militating against science, with transgender rights as his prime example. His argument sounds straightforward on the surface. Mammals are binary in their sex, except for rare biological anomalies. He frames it as an undeniable fact, one that supposedly proves his point about fairness in sports. But here's where it shifts. Shapiro doesn't stay in the lane of sports. The moment he's laid out his science, he pivots into a broader narrative about threats to truth, civilization, and morality.
There was one tweet that you sent, of course, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. There's this one tweet that you sent that drew an enormous amount of ire on particularly the right about rationalia, that you were looking forward to the...
I remember rationalia.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, what would rationalia, so this is for those who missed the tweet, the suggestion was
this like 3 years ago now. It
was a fascinating conversation because it began this whole kind of discussion about what a well-governed system would look like or who would govern that system.
It's a classic move. Start with something people assume is neutral, like biology, then wrap it in political judgment. By the time he's done, it's not really about competition in sports at all. It's about discrediting the legitimacy of trans identities entirely. Sports become the excuse, not the argument.
What are you trying to accomplish by asking yourself, is it science or is it not science? It's people in society.
But this is a perfect example of an area where suddenly it doesn't matter to say things that are just true.
Tyson doesn't fall for it. He doesn't get dragged into defending one side of the culture war. Instead, he strips the whole thing down to one principle. If we live in a free country, other people's freedom to be who they are should not concern you at all. That's not an emotional plea. That's a reframing of the debate itself. Shapiro's talking about biology. Tyson's talking about freedom.
If you want to say it's only sociological, then it's the purview of the social sciences. I don't care who studies it. It's real and it's there.
Well,
because it's real because it manifests.
But it is real because it manifests.
And the delivery, completely unshaken. No shouting, no rapid-fire interruptions. Tyson draws a clear line between science as a way to discover truth and science as a political weapon. He makes it plain. The danger isn't in the facts themselves, it's in how those facts get used once they're in the hands of people with power. Then, Tyson does something Shapiro never does. He admits there's no perfect answer yet. Yeah, especially in sports, the question of how to handle gender categories is unresolved. And instead of pretending to have the ultimate solution, he offers an idea that challenges the traditional framework entirely. What if competitions were organized not by gender identity, but by hormone levels?
It's an interesting fact about society that's worth learning about. to fight someone and say, it's not biological, it's just your this.
It's a bold suggestion, not because it solves everything, but because it breaks the assumption that the only way forward is to keep fighting over the old rules. That's what makes Tyson's response so effective. Shapiro's strategy relies on framing the discussion as a battle over truth versus denial. Tyson refuses that framing altogether, shifting it to freedom versus control.
The history of that exercise is a recipe for disaster if it involves discoveries that put people's freedom as defined in our Constitution at risk.
But now you're arguing for limitations on areas of particular study.
And that's the real reason this exchange hits so hard. On one side, you have a culture war tactic, using selective science to justify restricting rights. On the other, you have someone pointing out that the real threat isn't disagreement over biology. It's what happens when politicians take that biology and use it to legislate people out of their own lives.
Our own ability to govern ourselves in the face of what could be some information relative to other kinds of information.
Isn't that a bit of a problem?
Yes.
The difference is stark. One approach is all about fear of losing tradition, fear of change, fear of what someone else's existence might mean. The other is about trust that freedom can handle truth, even uncomfortable truth, without collapsing into panic and control.
But it is a real fact about real society.
Well, of course, nobody's denying that people identify how they want to identify.
So
the question is, what is the relationship of that to biology? Meaning that the argument is made that trans women are women, for example.
And the thing is, Tyson doesn't need to win on Shapiro's terms. He's not trying to. He's playing a different game entirely, and in doing so, he exposes just how flimsy Shapiro's setup really is. This isn't just a debate about sports or science. It's a clash between using facts to protect freedom and using facts to limit it. And in that arena, Tyson's calm precision leaves a much deeper mark than any rapid-fire soundbite ever could.
We need a way to protect people's freedoms in the face of whatever gets discovered scientifically.
And here's the kicker. Tyson makes it crystal clear this isn't some neat left versus right drama. It's not a blue states good, red states bad situation. Nope. This is a recurring pattern that pops up again and again throughout history, no matter who's in charge. Whether the topic is climate science, public health, or gender identity, the playbook looks suspiciously the same. Take a piece of data, twist it into something scarier, then feed it to the public as proof that urgent new laws are needed.
All laws are created only on the strength of evidence in support of them. Period.
That's the real paranoia Tyson's pointing to. Not the fear of what is true, but the fear of who will hold that truth, how they'll spin it, and what they'll do with it once they convince everyone they're right. The danger isn't that facts exist. The danger is when facts become weapons in the wrong hand.
It's bringing bias,
right,
which humans are highly susceptible to, and especially in the social sciences.
And if you think that's a stretch, Tyson doesn't have to look far for receipts. History is basically a highlight reel of moments when science got used as political ammo, and every single time freedom lost. Take eugenics, for example. A century ago, it was dressed up as cutting-edge genetics, complete with academic papers and charts. In reality, it was an excuse for forced sterilizations, racial discrimination, and government overreach that still leave scars today.
You know, when you look at Darwin and learn, of course, there are people, social Darwinists, which fed Nazism, right, and eugenics. But you part through those curtains. At the bottom of Darwin is the fact that we are all genetically connected.
Or McCarthyism, yeah, that wasn't just about political ideology. It leaned heavily on pseudo-psychology to identify so-called subversives and undesirables, leading to careers destroyed and freedom stripped away in the name of protecting the nation. And today, anti-trans laws are being sold as protecting biological truth, as if legislation is just a big science fair where lawmakers get to decide who wins based on the most convenient fact.
If I had some belief system based on my religion or culture or whatever, and I rise to political power and I want to make a law, the laws apply to everyone in the land. But if that law derives from my belief system, and now I force others into that law, that's a recipe for disaster.
Tyson's warning here is blunt. If you think the answer to a hot button issue is just bring out all the science and let politicians hash it out, you haven't been paying attention. The history of that process isn't pretty. It's a recipe for disaster, because the second those discoveries threaten someone's worldview or political base, they'll bend them, weaponize them, and aim them right at someone's freedoms.
But politicians keep us free. Yet there's so many politicians that are doing the opposite of that.
So why aren't you a libertarian?
And that scares me.
I'm a libertarian. Come over here. Just
okay.
The line is right here. Just join me over here.
And this is where Ben Shapiro's truth at all costs stance comes in. He argues that it's dangerous to avoid saying things that are true about biology. Sounds noble, right? Like, who could be against the truth? But Tyson isn't fooled. He knows truth isn't some neutral floating idea that sits in a vacuum. Truth in the hands of someone with political power can be just as dangerous as a lie.
That's profound. It means we have different skin color, but we are fundamentally identical as a species, okay?
Think about Tyson's analogy with gay rights. For decades, scientists have studied whether sexuality is biological or psychological. But Tyson's point is simple. It shouldn't matter. The answer to that question should have no bearing on whether someone gets to live freely. If it's biological, great. If it's psychological, so what? The danger comes when the answer is used to justify corrective measures, reorientation camps, or laws that strip rights away.
In society that want to constrict the freedom of expression of who and what people are. And that is a danger. So maybe there needs to be a line in the sand. Let science do what it does, but politicians keep us free.
This is where Tyson flips Shapiro's whole framing upside down. Shapiro acts like speaking a biological truth is always harmless. Tyson shows that once lawmakers get involved, even a harmless truth can become a loaded gun. That's why he insists that science should be a tool for understanding, not a gatekeeper for who gets to be free.
So there's less bias in the sciences that don't involve human behavior. You can still have bias, there's just less of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequences are less dire if anything that happens becomes policy. And so that's the digested analysis of what came out of Darwinism.
And that's the bigger game here. Tyson isn't arguing over the small details of biology because he knows the biology isn't the battlefield. So freedom is. If you let every new scientific discovery be the foundation for a new set of laws about how people are allowed to live, you're not protecting truth. You're protecting control.
The idea is any law that applies to everybody needs to be based on some objective truths. And how do you establish objective truths? The best way we know is by the methods and tools of science. And the strength of the law would be commensurate with the strength of the evidence to support it. And if you don't have the evidence to support it, you have no business making a law for it.
In Tyson's world, the principle is simple. Science should illuminate reality, not decide who gets a seat at the table. In Shapiro's world, truth is a mic drop, an ending point. But in Tyson's world, truth is just the starting point. And the real challenge is making sure it doesn't get twisted into the next reason someone loses their basic rights.
There's some fascinating strong points within it, but I would say that I have too much of me wants to help others, to possibly cross over the line to libertarians.
And that's why Tyson's calm, almost casual delivery hits harder than any shouting match could. He's not just winning an argument, he's exposing the playbook that's been running for decades. Because when you look closely, the pattern is obvious. The facts don't scare people. The misuse of facts does. And that's the danger Tyson's been warning about the whole time. Yeah, so here's the scene. Neil deGrasse Tyson is across from Ben Shapiro, the conservative pundit who prides himself on facts don't care about your feelings. It's supposed to be a conversation about science, biology, and policy, but Tyson, oh no, Tyson has other plans. He doesn't just debate Shapiro, like he reroutes the whole discussion.
That is how to guarantee an unstable culture, unstable civilization. It destabilizes civilization.
We get to Tyson's radical position. I mean radical not in the hippie commune sense, but in the nobody in mainstream politics ever says this out loud sense. He basically plants a giant flag in the ground and says,
I said objective truth, and people read that as absolute truth. And that's not the word I used.
Look, let science do what science does. Discover, measure, explain. But there's a line in the sand. You do not use those discoveries to strip people of their rights. It's such a simple, clear idea, yet almost nobody says it outright. Politicians, Tyson's not subtle here. He calls out the ones who pull the reverse move, cherry pick a statistic, wrap it in moral panic, and suddenly people lose freedoms they've had for decades.
It's not a society of free inquiry, which I think you need ultimately.
Tyson frames it as a constitutional issue. Think about it. In his view, your freedoms shouldn't hinge on whether a lab study says something is optimal or a sociology paper says a behavior is abnormal. Because if rights are conditional on data, those rights can vanish with the next data set.
The history of that exercise is a recipe for disaster if it involves discoveries that put people's freedom as defined in our Constitution at risk.
But now you're arguing for limitations on areas of particular study.
And then with that ever so slight smirk, Tyson slides in a quiet, sharp jab aimed straight at Shapiro's brand. If you really care about liberty, this is where you plant your flag. Translation? Yeah, put up or shut up. Then comes the libertarian moment, and oh boy, this is the part that made me snort laugh. The host leans in with a grin and says something like, "Why aren't you a libertarian? Come over here." It's the kind of line that's half flirt, half political recruitment pitch. Tyson, he's not biting. No bumper sticker labels for him. He waves off the political branding entirely like Yalitarian Norgada, not because he's dodging, but because for him, this is about principle, not team colors.
I think that the problem I'm seeing on a lot of sides is...
What is your motivation?
Why? Why does that matter?
It matters because if you have political power, you could end up creating legislation that subtracts freedoms from people who previously were enjoying the same freedoms as you. The history of that exercise
then make a better argument.
Doesn't end well.
And then comes the real mic drop. Tyson shifts the whole framing of the conversation. Shapiro came to talk about what is true, as in the raw facts of biology or data sets. Tyson says, so yeah, that's cute, but here's the real question. What do we do with the truth? That's not just a pivot. That's intellectual judo. He takes Shapiro's own momentum, flips it, and suddenly the fight is happening in an entirely different arena. And here's the killer punch. Tyson warns that if people don't trust that truth will be used fairly, then they'll stop letting truth be discovered in the first place. In other words, without protection from abuse, like free inquiry just dies. And that is why this wasn't just an interview. It was a blueprint for how to stay sane in a world where everyone wants to turn data into ammunition. Tyson just reminded us that science isn't the villain, right? But bad politics can turn it into one real quick. Like this video and make sure to subscribe to the channel to get more updates.